Morning, colleagues. Welcome to this meeting of Cabinet. Could I have a note of any apologies?
I have an apology from Vic Bourne, Religious Representative, Chair.
An order of business?
As published.
Any declarations of interest? Thank you. It takes us on to item number 4, the 2012-13 SPI results and revised national data set.
Thank you, Chair. There have been some changes to how SPIs are organised in Scotland, not least because we have, as of 2013-14, SPIs been replaced by a series of benchmark indicators being put together by SOLACE, the Society of Local Authority Chief Execs in Scotland. So we have some changes coming up, but this is really a reflection of where we are in 2012-13, and there's a table that summarises the position on page 3 of the report. What I think that shows is that, in general, the direction of travel we have in respect of our performance indicators is positive. We're increasingly moving indicators out of the bottom quartile. We've still got some more work to do in that, but over a number of years we've demonstrated positive progress in that regard, and that's a good thing. What we have set out as the appendices to the report, Appendix 1, the indicators in the top and the bottom quartile. The details of the SPIs set out over pages, the pages through to 48, and then at 49 we have, from 49 to 54, we have to 55, we have the comparisons for other Scottish councils. I think there's an awful lot of interesting information in there. I also reflect on the fact that presented like this, it's a little bit impenetrable to really look into the details of what other authorities have done. I think for most of these, as set out at the beginning of the report, it's the relative Midlothian position which is of interest, as well as our absolute performance as an authority. In terms of the specific indicators, or indeed the general position as regards performance, happy to take questions. I'm sure my colleagues will be happy to assist from a departmental perspective.
Thanks, Kenneth. It's certainly a very useful report, and it certainly, to me, shows a clear direction in travel, the reduction in the bottom quartile performance. One fairly specific question I did want to ask was on page 8, the home care hours per thousand. There's a significant shift there from 13th to 31st. Is there a particular reason around that, over and above the notes that are there?
No, I guess, I mean, this is a difficult one because we're working really hard to make using the reablement model, and that means that we reduce people's dependency, and we reduce the number of hours that are going into that are going into packages. What I would say, I suppose, to give people confidence around this area, we're reducing the number of people going into care homes. And this measure was originally brought about because there was a concern that home care package weren't really delivering and providing viable alternatives to care home. And as you know from the opening of Cowan Court and the work that's going on in our support for older people at home, we are achieving that, but we are also achieving we're managing that with lower packages. We've also had a huge jump in the number of telecare users, so it's one small part of what's a whole package of services that are going into houses.
Colleagues, any questions on the report? I think clearly there's a lot of data in here which over time I'm sure we'll continue to see further improvement on, but we've got a recommendation at 5 to note the report. Note further benchmarking will be undertaken with an aim to improve future performance. We agree with the recommendation.
Just something I picked up on page 99, the number of teenage pregnancies. It's got a figure of 59.4% in there as per 1,000 population. Does that mean that there's 60 or 600? Page 99. The middle one.
We'll maybe pick that one up in the next report.
Okay. I was a bit confused whether that one you just read was finished. Okay.
Okay, if we agree the recommendation item 4, that takes us then on to item 5, the quarter 2 performance reports, and first up's the Midlothian Council.
Thank you. I think I mentioned in relation to the first report the volume of information that was there, and the volume here is pretty considerable as well, which is something we perhaps need to reflect on. This is the first 6 months of 2013-14. We set out on the opening page the vision of the community planning partners, the 3 priority areas, and the themes in the Single Midlothian Plan. That's on page 59 of your agenda. And then there's several pages setting out an update on progress in relation to the 5 community planning themes, much of which is positive, and some of which indicates the areas where we still have some real challenges. I think I'd just pick out a couple of things which I think are worthy of note. They're obviously happy to take questions from members on any aspect of this. On page 61, under Getting It Right for Every Midlothian Child, the early years work, it is one of our priorities, and I've had from a number of sources some very positive feedback about the work that is being done in Midlothian. This is exceptionally important in terms, of course, of our approach to early intervention and prevention, which will significant budget implications further down the line. Over the page, I think it'd be remiss of me if I didn't mention the opening of Lasswade High School. And for me, it's not simply about the facilities which are there, which are obviously absolutely excellent. It's then about how we utilise these to drive further performance, not simply in terms of attainment, but also in terms of sport, leisure, and other aspects of what's available there. In terms of the SQA results mentioned halfway down page 62, I think what we saw in the most recent figures was a number of areas of improvement, some areas which haven't improved, and a mixture of patterns across courses and across schools. We have a new head of education in place. There's a very strong focus on this particular aspect. And the reason I particularly draw that out is, of course, in terms of positive destinations, which is the second of our 3 priorities, the longer-term solution to that has to involve improving the performance of our schools. It's something we've said for quite a number of years. That focus remains exceptionally important, and I think that we have the leadership in place to really drive that forward, and I think that's exceptionally important for us. Moving on from educational aspects and GERFEC, page 64, support for business. Again, this is something we had a number of discussions recently. We will have the Midlothian Economic Recovery Plan coming forward in the very near future. And I do think that as a council, it's about not simply that those functions of the council which serve the business community support business, but also that the council overall has that ethos and approach, which is very much about increasing opportunities and increasing the availability of employment. Because we know that, again, in terms of intervention and prevention, the creation of employment within families in Midlothian is a critical intervention which can enable families then to improve various other aspects of their lives. I think that's important as well. In 66, we have the emerging challenges. I don't think any of these are unfamiliar to you. I think as a council we are doing a lot of positive work on trying to mitigate some of the impacts of welfare reform. There's much more to be done on that, but I think that we are seen as being in a strong position in terms of how we've responded to that. The issue of funding and demographics is one which is going to be, continually a challenge for us. And I think in that regard, the whole issue of health and social care integration, I think that the steps we've taken thus far are positive, but we should never underestimate the challenge of that moving forward. The thing which lies behind all of this, of course, and isn't specifically mentioned on that page, the budget challenge, the need to continue to drive transformational change in order to bridge our budget gap. And that is going to remain for the management team, and I think for the members as well, a very major area of focus in the coming months and years. There's a huge amount of data, again, with this report. I think there's a lot of interesting issues in there, and Councillor Bryant's already picked up on one which we might want to return to in terms of the detailed discussion. The one point I would make in terms of the overall PI summary on 67 and 68, in terms of the figures on complaints, I think there's been some of the figures have gone in the wrong boxes, just let's say that. Because in terms of the complaints received and resolved at the first indicator, these don't seem to be correct. And I think there's been a transposition of figures between the first and second indicators, the percentages, and the overall numbers, which is why these figures at first glance look a bit strange, I'll just say. Happy to deal with any questions.
Could we maybe get a correction in that circulated
Absolutely, we'll do that.
after? Could we take Jim's question on page 99, the teenage pregnancies, and then I've got Lisa. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
Jamie, do you want to?
Yeah, it mentions a percentage against a figure.
Yeah.
I would have expected a figure rather than a percentage.
Yeah, we have got quite a difficulty with this one in terms of the Integrated Children's Services Board about teenage pregnancies, and Councillor Beattie will agree we've discussed this, because it's teenage pregnancies, it's not births. So in terms of the proportion of teenage pregnancies per 1,000 population was 59.4 in 2011, and the Lothian average was 45.2. So there's a lot of work being done with young people in terms of teenage pregnancies, but I think this is an area we discuss quite frequently at the Integrated Children's Services Board, because it's the data that we get from the health service. And it's what we're doing about it, what we're doing to prevent teenagers becoming pregnant. And there's work done by MyPass, by our health colleagues, work done in schools with young people. So this figure doesn't convert into teenage births, but it's still not a good figure in terms of the trauma that a unplanned pregnancy could lead to.
It's just that 59% of 1,000 is quite high. It strikes me being...
It's 59 pregnancies. It's not a... Oh, right, that's... No, it's 59. So that's wrong. No.
If I could just put further clarity around that point to reassure colleagues, I think it's important to note that these figures do not necessarily reflect teenage pregnancies in our schools. Many of these young people are in fact no longer at school, and just because they're teenage pregnancies, it can actually give a false indication of exactly what that means. In fact, our teenage school attendees, our school pupils who are becoming pregnant, is actually almost immeasurable. It is such a tiny amount. There is a belief that there may be some other hidden data around young people at school who are becoming pregnant and losing their baby at a very early stage, and that is not necessarily reported to us. But as far as the information we have that is reliable from NHS, we believe that the information we have is a reflection of something that is a downward trend in Midlothian, even though it is still above the national average. And as the Director's already commented, there is a very significant amount of work ongoing that is apparently bearing a lot of positive results. And it's something that certainly I know that colleagues will join me in being most concerned to make sure that all efforts are put to this work. If I could add further, please, Convener, on the Chief Executive's comments, it seems important to reflect on the early years learning session 3. There were 2 pieces of information I think colleagues will be pleased to hear. I was present at learning session 3 when of all the storyboards and every operational authority, and in this case ours is East and Mid because we're working jointly with East Lothian. Every authority aims to display a storyboard to illustrate the main focus of the work that's being done on early years. And I have to pay tribute to the staff that the one for East and Mid, which was provided by Midlothian staff, was the most extraordinary standard and was commented on as being outstanding. Similarly, members of staff, most notably June McGill and Lisa Barnes from Hawthorne Den, made a presentation to a national audience, which I think anyone would recognise how challenging that can be. And they performed outstandingly. Many authorities across Scotland are looking to Midlothian as a model of extremely good practice in this regard. And I think if you set that against the context of our Mayfield nursery inspection, which is also referred to in the report, you'll see that in spite of some serious challenges ahead, there has already been a remarkable amount of extraordinarily good work done. We may well find ourselves the victims of being an overnight success that took a few years, particularly when you look at the standard of excellent that was achieved over the period of the past 6 years from a not very exciting place 6 years ago to the exciting award of an excellent from the Care Inspectorate when they made a surprise inspection, an unannounced inspection to Mayfield Nursery recently. So I think it's reassuring to note that we have some extraordinary individuals working, and in spite of the challenges, I don't think we should be too daunted, providing we keep working in the same way and encouraging our staff. My biggest concern, and I don't know if the Director's in a position to comment, is how, given the enormity of the challenges and the very limited size of the teams, are we taking steps to ensure that the capacity of those teams is being supported? And by that I'm referring to how we support morale going forward, because I think the size of these challenges can't be overemphasised, but within that I think it's important that they are not presented as daunting or impossible to the staff responsible for delivering them. I'd be grateful to know whether from the Director or the Chief Executive what measures we're putting in place to support staff morale through quite challenging times to continue this very good work.
Well, given that Mary's bleeding into her tissue, perhaps I'll speak first on that one from a generic point of view, and perhaps Mary can say something more specific. I mean, I think that as a council, in the context of the People Strategy over the last 3 years, our approach to supporting our staff has changed, and it is about celebrating the successes we have. It is about opening up the channels of communication. It is about making ourselves available as senior managers. It is about being open to challenge. And I think that I think we've achieved some success in that regard. And I think the thing we all need to be careful of is that, when the pressure's on and there's lots going on, that we don't lose hold of that strand, that thread. Because I think it is exceptionally important to staff that we do have that openness. And some of the success of that is reflected in the staff survey results we each year. I mean, they're mixed. It's not the same across all of the council, but in general there is a positive trend in terms of the view of staff in relation to, management and communication and various other aspects of their employment, and that's very important as we go into increasingly difficult times. So I think from a corporate point of view, that'd be my response, and if Mary feels able to comment on the more localised issues.
I think what has been commented on in the current inspection, and we've just received the draft report, and what they've been very clear about is the leadership from the Community Planning Partnership, from our elected members, and from the staff in leading staff through these changes. And I think that's really what it's going to be, is having clear direction from the authority, clear about the challenges ahead, but clear that people are part of the solution. And I think that's how we keep things going, by being very positive, by recognising and valuing the work that's been done, but also recognising that we're in uncharted waters here. We're going to be in for a difficult few years, but it's how we work together to do that and concentrate on the priorities. We need to be thinking about how do we ensure that the resources go to where they're needed, as opposed to we just divvy them up across the authority because that's the way we've done it. So, we've got more challenges ahead, but I think through clear leadership, and we've got that certainly through Peter McNaughton, I think he's proving, in a short space of time to have moved schools forward. So I'm confident about the future.
Just for the record, Convener, I can't speak well enough of the enormous contribution that our Head of Education has already delivered and is continuing to deliver, and certainly in all my visits to schools, that view of the contribution he's making and inspiring is very much reflected from both the head teachers, but also all the teachers around the schools in general at both primary and secondary level, of a sense of true inspirational leadership being delivered, and for that I'm deeply grateful.
Thank you. Obviously we're all aware of the challenges welfare reform is posing for us, and I suppose as we continue to do everything we can here, I have to note disappointment that our local MP didn't, in failing to turn up to vote against the bedroom tax last week. Those who could have stopped it in its tracks sadly failed to do so, so we're going to be saddled with it. So yeah, that certainly continues to be a challenge for the next period, so we're just going to have to do what we can to work around that. If only there was an option that we could get rid of it. Any other questions on the Council report? Okay, that then takes us on to Health and Social Care, first up Housing and Community Safety.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of progress in Q2 for Housing and Community Safety, there was submission of the Strategic Housing Plan covering the period 2013 through to 2018. This is an annual strategic plan which the Scottish Government require all local authorities to submit to identify the main investment priorities for affordable housing. And despite the considerable level of investment that there has been in Midlothian with our new build programme, there is still a requirement to increase the supply of affordable housing across all areas of Midlothian, and that's equally reflected in the current CESS plan process, which members will be familiar with, that's currently being developed. In the second quarter, we also re-tendered for the care and support contract. This was in terms of our supported housing, and the provider of support has changed. That is now Places for People. And we're certainly seeing significant improvements in the short period of time that they've been in place since the 1st of August, as the specification has required that they also deliver on a new pathway excuse me, to improve outcomes for the service users within that accommodation. In criminal justice, we had the Risk Management Authority carry out a report on the level of service and case management intervention, otherwise known as LSCMI. This is an assessment and management tool that's been rolled out across all local authorities since 2011. So this was a review to reflect back on our practice here in Midlothian, and certainly it was reassuring to get that confirmation of the consistency of practice of criminal justice social work staff here, indicating that there is the continuity of service and assessment for clients that we would be hoping for. Also in the second quarter, for environmental health, the air quality management area and path head was agreed at Council to be considered for revocation, and that's currently being worked through with colleagues in Scottish Government, and we would note that we are the first local authority to be in that position. In terms of challenges, we had conclusion of the service review for housing, which covered other services in benefits and revenues and property maintenance and voids, and the redesign of those changes in services is now being mainstreamed, and we are seeing the results through to Q3 in terms of the projected savings being realised. The Family Resilience Project, which has been piloted in the current year, has been submitted in terms of additional funding to take us through to March 2015. Whilst that was developed within community safety, it now sits within our colleagues with children and families, and the project board has the overview of the work that's going on there in terms of intervention and key working to an intensive degree with the identified families, and again we're seeing positive outcomes even at this early stage with those families who are subject to the project, and equally as officers we're looking at the learning from that in terms of the redesign of services and how we apply that collectively across a one council model. The final challenge in Q2 has been in terms of partnership working for our services. Environmental health and trading standards, whilst that's come to realisation in the current quarter, and we'll report on that in due course, with the start of the partnership working with environmental health and trading standards with East Lothian. Certainly the work towards that commenced in Q2, and similarly with criminal justice social work, we're looking at opportunities for sharing of services with East Lothian. In terms of the PI summary, I'll maybe preempt a possible question in terms of our complaints performance, which I would acknowledge has certainly been poor in the first quarter. It's improved in the second quarter, but not sufficiently. And certainly we are aware in terms of the analysis of that where the majority of complaints have gone out of date, that's been in a case of a 1, 2 and up to a 4-day limit in order to conclude the complaint to the satisfaction of the customer. I am aware of a couple of exceptional cases because I was involved in those to get to conclusion which went beyond weeks and into a couple of months, but that, again, that was in order to achieve a satisfactory outcome for the customer as opposed to being adhering to the timelines of our targets in those cases. And I'll pause for any questions.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly encouraging that the work that's been done in the service has been recognised by the fact that the regulators not coming back in to re-inspect and have actually accepted the assurances from the work that's been done. That is a very clear indicator of the progress that's been made. And certainly from our point of view, the Family Resilience Project, the speed of success certainly surprised me. I mean, I think we all knew the potential to be a great project, but just the pace at which the immediate benefits are being seen is quite spectacular. So, yeah, I think we need to do what we can to continue to support that work and continue to look at the other ways we can work differently to achieve other success like that. I've got Lisa first, then Jamie.
Just a couple of points. Thank you, Convener. Thank you very much to the Head of Housing for the reference to the path head achievements on air quality, and I can't express my appreciation to the environmental health team in leading that work over a sustained period of time with great tenacity, without which it wouldn't have been possible. And the consequential spin-off, which addressed fuel poverty in some of our rural villages. And I know that we have had some difficulties with the current last phase of that with the Duerton project. I wondered if we now have reassurance that the contractors will now deliver the gas supply to Durton without further difficulties, and whether or not there may be any plans, since apparently the Westminster energy regulators were unable to restrain the greed of the utility companies, further imposing on the good people of Midlothian extortionate fuel bills. I wondered if there were any further plans to explore possibilities of delivering gas supplies to Cowsland, where we have a significant number of older people who are struggling with the cost of oil-fired central heating, or having, in some cases, to still endure open fires for both heat and hot water, which as they get older becomes increasingly challenging. My other question was around the cool-down crew and whether or not there were particular difficulties that might be strategically addressed, where the 6 youngsters who did not complete the course might be, at another time, encouraged to do so.
Thank you. In terms of Durton, certainly we can give that commitment. It's been our intention to have the gas installation concluded there. There have been issues in terms of land ownership about where the gas converter could be sited. I understand that that may now be resolved. I'll certainly need to take further advice from my construction colleagues, and indeed I'm meeting Gary Fairley after Cabinet this morning, so I'll come back to Councillor Beattie in due course with that specific reference. In terms of Cowsland, the installation of gas is more problematic there, and certainly in terms of compliance with the housing quality standard, we've been looking at an electrical-based solution, including whether that's on a district heating scheme or indeed whether it's on a subsoil heating system. We are looking at something more innovative there because it will be restricted to an electricity in the terms of the heating supply that has to be provided there. But again, I'll get further information from my construction colleagues to provide a fuller answer on that. For the cool-down crew, this is a fire service-led project which is funded through the community safety funding, and certainly it has proved successful over the last 3 years, which we've funded that, and meets our criteria in terms of diversionary projects for younger people, to take them away from prospects of antisocial behaviour. Currently the scheme is supplied through referrals from schools, from the high schools, but because of the difficulty that we've had with this year's intake, we're looking to expand that to other youth agencies, including family members within the Resilience Project, actually, and to answer the question, no, it wouldn't preclude somebody from coming back to have that opportunity again.
Thanks, Kevin. I'd like to ask you a couple of questions, but first I'd also like to reiterate what Owen said about the Resilience Project. It's been absolutely dramatic, and it's everybody involved in that wants a vote of thanks. The partnership working, you were saying, going to produce a report. Could you give us some indication of when that will be ready?
Certainly, in terms of environmental health and trading standards, we're committed to a 12-month pilot. That just started on the 4th of November with East Lothian and Mid Lothian for environmental health trading standards. We are providing the management services on environmental health to East Lothian, and they're providing strategic management to us in terms of trading standards. We will review that at 6 months and certainly bring that forward at that time, and then a complete review within the 12-month pilot period. Currently we're in discussions in respect of criminal justice services. There is the Women's Service in respect of the Willow Centre, which is a holistic health and well-being orientated provision. and rather than having that in a fixed place, either in East or Midlothian, we're looking at a more mobile-orientated service, and indeed there is a seminar on that with health and local authority colleagues on Monday, and we'll be able to bring that back once we've got that project provision concluded. So in terms of when, probably by the next quarter, sorry to answer you.
And the final question is a section on page 135 under environmental offences. I get a lot of correspondence from constituents about dog fouling, and I see there's only two people were in the quartile. Two were given penalty notices. I don't know how we can increase that.
Certainly this is a perennial problem in terms of dog fouling, and it's one that we certainly have had given particular focus to in the past year, and we continue to do that through the wardens and also the other environmental health officers who are accredited for issuing of fixed penalty notices where they encounter the fact that somebody isn't picking up after their dog, because that's clearly an offence. Certainly we have year on year increased the fixed penalty notices since 2010. The trend has been upwards, and we have also been working with the police, who are in a similar position to issue fixed penalty notices where they encounter any dog fouling occurring. We have in recent months, about the last 6 weeks, we launched the Green Dog Walker scheme, which had a good reception. This is in terms of our emphasis about co-production with communities where this is occurring, because clearly we can't have a great enough spread across the county to be able to capture every instance that's occurring, but the people who are in those localities can, by giving us the information where we can direct the resources where there are particular offenders on particular routes at regular times, usually at the school run, day and night, where we can then focus that. We've also in the past year, I have to say, carried out covert surveillance. We're not doing that at present, but we have done that, and we can deploy that again where there are particular problems. What we did find in that is that 90% plus of owners were actually uplifting after the dog. It was 93%, I think. And it was just the remainder that were then being observed who were not, and in turn were issued with fixed penalty notices. So whilst I wouldn't indicate it's not a prevalent problem, it certainly is the case that the majority of dog owners are acting responsibly.
Thank you.
I have a question on behalf of Lisa. On the last point, can we have greater support from the police who anecdotally are not taking the role of enforcement of appropriate dog owner behaviour?
Certainly I can raise that. There is a current consultation in terms of dog control from the Scottish Government, which was just announced in the last week, as to how we see dog control notices and dog control legislation since it was introduced in 2010 by the Scottish Government, and we will feed that back as part of that process. Similarly, there is a Justice Subcommittee looking for information on local policing since the police reform on the 1st of April, and we'll make the opportunity to feed back at a national level, but we continue to do that locally through the delivery group on a monthly basis, where the police are engaged with us.
Okay, thank you. I think with that, note that report. Thanks, Kevin. That then takes us on to adult and community care.
Thank you, Chair. The report outlined contains a number of very significant service developments that are happening in adult and community care. Across Lothian, there's a real commitment coming from the 4 councils, but also in particular from NHS, to move forward swiftly with integration. And that's certainly happening here in Midlothian. We've had a number of very positive experiences of working with health to transform services and deliver better outcomes for people, and that's particularly in mental health, where we had very early success ahead of the other councils, and we're building on that. We've got a joint management, health and community care management team place here in Midlothian, and we're already seeing the benefits of that in terms of our day-to-day work, the way we're approaching challenges, and just that better understanding across health and care, and we can really see where the dividend is going to come from in terms of the impact of integration on people's lives. In relation to older people, we're ready to, staff have been identified, and in the next week or two we're going to be recruiting the team leader. So we'll have a single service for people who are suffering from dementia up and running in January. That service is built around people's needs. It's not the service that we have traditionally inherited around professional roles, etc., but it's incorporating it around those roles, around people's journey through dementia, from diagnosis through to end of life. And it's really about getting really good coordination, about putting a focus on giving people good information, supporting people to live well with dementia. So very positive, and really looking forward to seeing that service up and running. Members will be aware that we opened Cowan Court in September. Again, an excellent service, but the critical bit is the shift away from people being in a care home to people being able to live in their own houses. We're going to roll. We're working, Lynn, who is involved in the development of that, is working with other sheltered housing providers, and we'll be looking at developing that model in other places across Midlothian, within existing housing stock, I might add, at this stage. The other important development is the frailty. We've been allocated 380,000 to Midlothian annually, and that's really to build on the work that we're doing in rapid response. In Midlothian, we have a very high number of people who go into hospital for what we call unscheduled emergency care, particularly the over 85s. We're higher than the rest of the Lothians. So really our challenge as we go forward is about understanding what's lying behind that. But we've appointed a geriatrician who will take up post in January. We're going to have advanced nurse practitioners, and the focus will be on, where possible and where appropriate, providing people with healthcare treatment in their own home that they otherwise would have had to go into hospital for in an emergency. And we're really, again, looking forward to the potential impact that will have on people's lives. Learning disability, there's considerable work going forward there. Midlothian is leading the initiative across Lothian in working out how we integrate learning disability services between social care and health. And we've got a number of proposals on the table for integrating community services. We've a new day service for younger people starting in October. Again, this was part of the plan that we put forward last year to reduce spend in learning disabilities, and it is about supporting young people with complex needs here in Midlothian rather than busing them to other services across the wider Edinburgh area. But it's about giving people a very person-centred service, but also reducing the spend. And we're also looking at bringing forward plans for a new housing development that will address those very high spend packages for people with very complex needs, particularly the ones that are out of area. And we're also looking at how we're using our respite at the moment and whether we're getting best value out of that. In all of these developments, the focus is on reducing expenditure, but first and foremost, it's about providing a more person-centred service. Carer Centre, again, last month I attended the opening of the new Carer Centre in Harden Green. A lovely building. We're very fortunate here in Midlothian. Vocal is the voluntary organisation that supports carers that do really good work. We work very closely with them. Very strong partnership that is so critical in the support of carers. So they've opened a fabulous new building in Harden Green, accessible, and a whole range of support services for carers there. We're also doing work around strengthening our approach to sensory impairment, and just in relation to mental health, we had the 21st anniversary of the Orchard Centre. Many of the members attended that event, and I know they will acknowledge with me that it's an excellent service that we provide, and it's at the heart of our success in mental health services in Midlothian. In terms of the challenges, the welfare reform continues to present very significant challenges, not just to this council in terms of our finances, but more importantly to people within our communities. We are seeing it in a number of areas. Interestingly, criminal justice is one of the areas where we've seen more people presenting destitute and in need of assistance. We've done work with the Food Bank to make sure that we've got resources available within this team. But some of the statistics from the Food Bank would suggest that young men are particularly vulnerable to the changes that are happening, and some of that's around the benefits being stopped and people whose lives are already a bit chaotic finding themselves just very near the edge very quickly. But the other areas where we've worked and is around, we've targeted carers. Recent survey identified that most important thing that carers need is good information advice. The second thing they need is help around their financial affairs. So we've got a welfare benefits service dedicated, working in vocal and Alzheimer's, focusing specifically on providing welfare benefits to family carers to help them with that. But the other area where we've put in additional welfare benefit support is the Orchard Centre, and again targeting people with mental health issues. People with mental health issues again have felt the impact very significantly of the changes, and the switch to employment support allowance has affected them in particular. So a lot of activity going on there, but it remains a very significant challenge. The other thing I should mention is we had the launch a few weeks ago of a new service that's been funded by a combination of lottery and other funders, and it's joining up welfare benefits, debt advice and advice around fuel, the cost of fuel. And what we're trying to do is, rather than the kind of fragmentation we've had of services going to the CAB for one thing, ChangeWorks for another, making sure that we get a very smooth pathway for people. And we're also picking up people who are presenting at for the welfare fund, so that it's not, the welfare fund is not, it's not, our focus mustn't be on those kind of handouts for people in crisis. Our focus needs to be on preventing the crisis arising, or making sure people who present, they get the help to make sure it doesn't happen again, or we help them to sort out the underlying debt, etc. So a lot of positive work, but very significant challenge. The demographics remains, and the pressures and increasing numbers. I commented already on the size of home care packages, and we are working very hard to make sure that every penny we've got out there is working, that we're supporting older people to be well, and also to be able to look after themselves, support family carers as long as we can. And I guess the key to managing the demographics is the transformation. The way we've transformed services, in older people's services in particular. And although we've had very significant pressures last year, and we are managing pressures this year, the reality is that we have managed when you look at it over the piece, we've managed to keep our spend under control when you look at it and take into account the amount of money that's come out of budgets over a number of years. Our big focus is on learning disabilities and trying to get those high-cost packages down with, but again, the focus has to be on quality and delivering better outcomes. I'm happy to pause there and respond to any questions from members.
Thank you very much. As usual, a very busy time for everyone in the service. It is really good that now that the Shadow Board's been established for the health and care, and we've met 3 times and everything's gone forward really smoothly, and the prevention of hospital admissions is improving and we're getting all that down so folks don't get iller when they go into hospital with hospital-acquired infections. I'm just very impressed with all the work that's going on. I'm further impressed when I went to the presentation of the awards for the staff who'd taken time to learn and improve their skills at work. Very impressive. Please send my thanks to everyone.
Okay. With that, thank you. If we note the contents of that report, that takes us on to the Children and Families Q2 Performance Report.
Okay, thank you. Bleeding nose now resolved. I always report at these meetings on public protection, on child protection, because it's the main thrust of our work. You know that we've had spikes over the last 3 years. We have tried to look at why these spikes occur, and we commissioned with Scotland a national organisation, public protection organisation, to review the robustness of our procedures and approaches. Interestingly, we've just had the initial draft of the feedback from the inspectors, and we've also had the initial report from With Scotland. And what is interesting is they haven't told us anything we don't know, which is good, in that there are no surprises. There's nothing that we're missing or we're doing wrong. But the benefit of the report from With Scotland is it compared us with comparator authorities, and it also compared us nationally and gave us figures on what's happening nationally in terms of drug use, domestic violence. So all of that comes to bear on what's happening in Midlothian. So although they've told us nothing new, it's very helpful in that some of the research, they've done the research for us, so we can begin to look at what we're doing. I think in the next quarter I'll actually be reporting there's been a rise in child protection, but again that's to do with keeping children safe. Do you know what I mean? So it's not we're driving down the figures at all costs. It's if a child needs to be placed on the child protection register, we're very clear about why that child needs to be placed on the child protection register. The Midlothian, the Getting It Right for Every Child policy is firmly embedded, and again the inspectors commented on that staff on the ground were clear about the roles of the named person and the lead professional, and this is not the case nationally. There's some confusion over it, and that's very positive that they have commented on that. Again, in child protection, we've set ourselves ambitious targets of 100%, and one of the things the inspectors fed back to us was, well, you're not reaching your targets. And we're saying, well, yeah, that's fine, but we're not reducing our targets so that we meet them. We have ambitious targets for our children, and we strive to meet them. Again, it goes back to the Children's Services inspection. The inspectors reported no concern in their reading of 97 case files. They've fed back to us in the draft inspection report, and what they're saying is that almost all children, I'm trying to think of the wording, had robust care plans in place. So this kind of follows through on what they're saying. Yes, there is room for improvement. Yes, there are things that we have to do. But again, in terms of comfort for the elected members, knowing that we're moving in the right direction, I think it's positive. The Fostering and Adoption Service, again, we've reported that we've reduced the number of children out with fostering placements, that our foster care recruitment has been very good. But I did report to you the last time that our permanence and our adoption service, the leadership had been reported as weak. And I have discussed this here before. And I think that is actually going to hit the press at some point this week, because what's happened is there's been a national report, and Midlothian was the only authority with a weak rating in terms of leadership of the adoption service. I explained that before, that we had the same service being assessed by inspectors assessing the adoption service and inspectors assessing the fostering service. And from the same service, one was good and one was weak. we know the reasons for that. It's to do with drift. It's to do with youngsters not moving on, being caught. You know, that they will go for, we're looking at long-term care for these children or permanent options, but due to a combination of things, sometimes out with our control, these youngsters remain, you know, looked after children instead of moving to permanent families. Some of it's to do with legal terminology. We've discussed before that a children's hearing should be for a child. You've heard it, it's based on needs, not deeds. And yet now when we go to children's hearings, you've got mum's drug lawyer, mum's drug advocacy worker, dad's drug advocacy worker, mum's lawyer, dad's lawyer, and hey-ho, the social worker's the only person advocating for the child. And they're becoming more complex. And we've raised that at the Critical Site Overview Group. We've discussed it in a number of places. And I was also speaking to the chair of the panel last week and raised it with her as well. So, we looked at the children. Last year we had 6 children who had gone into residential care. We've done a really intense review of why these children arrived in care, why they needed that level of support, where were the transition points and what could we do better, and that has been rolled out as a training programme now. So we've got the learning from that. I think I've discussed here that a Midlothian child is a Midlothian child, and I'm going to get stickers made for cars, and people are now beginning to feed that back to us. A Midlothian child is a Midlothian child. So in the past, we had the view that, you know, the problem needed to be moved away from us into somewhere else, and somewhere else was better at dealing with it. And in actual fact, that's not the case. Foster care placements continue to reduce. This is the month where I get really nervous. November is the time that children families referrals go like that. They go skyward. And then in February, they go slightly skyward. And that's to do with youngsters going back to school in August. The schools have worked really hard, trying to keep them in school, trying different options. And then people feel we can't cope anymore. And staff this month are saying, well, we're really feeling it. But it's always the same in November and always the same in February. So it's about how we plan for that. Do you know what I mean? It's not a surprise that it happens every year. If we track over the last 5 years, we can do that. Youngsters being sent to secure accommodation, again, has remained steady at 2 young people, and that's good because we've came from 5 over the previous years. We've kept it at 2 young people. Dalkeith House is doing really well in terms of the new provisions that have opened, and we're using that as community-based support. So rather than using it as a residential facility and filling it up with 4 young people, and that's them stuck there, it's about what do we do to keep young people out of residential care. We've already spoken about the Family Resilience Project, really positive work going on there. 3 families, 17 children, it's a big undertaking, and we've already saw the benefits of that. And so that's in terms of the positives. The challenges, again, it's the same as child protection will always be here because it's always a challenge to us. The biggest challenge for us in children and families is staff absence. We have a number of staff on long-term sick, and that impacts on our figures. And again, we have stability in the locality teams, which has been really good because if you recall, previously there was one team that had 35 staff over a 3-year period. That has completely stabilised in terms of the locality teams, and that's good. Out with authority placements, discussed earlier on, we've done a review of 6 children who went into residential care and really looking at how we can keep youngsters within Midlothian. And I'll pause there for questions.
Mary referred to the November and February spikes, November being the most challenging. And if we take that 5-year slice, would we see a similar picture emerging nationally, or is it a Midlothian phenomenon? And regardless of that, are there other solutions where, given that we can anticipate that being a spike for all the reasons that are axiomatic, what can we do with other agencies and partner organisations and community groups and third sector groups to perhaps bring some respite to both schools and the youngsters themselves?
I don't know about nationally, Lisa. I've never researched that far. I think there is a lot of good work that goes on at locality level. We have locality forums in schools. In high schools, we meet fortnightly discussing youngsters who are maybe just beginning to show their horns, and things are going a bit off kilter for them, and what can we do together to support these youngsters to do the preventative work. And what was really interesting and both annoying in the inspection was they didn't look at our stage 2 supports. They didn't look at what we did at stage 2 to prevent things escalating. They only looked at stage 3 stuff. So there's lots of really good work goes on. We also have 6 weekly multi-agency meetings in primaries and in secondary schools. And again, these are multi-agency. What can we do together to prevent this escalating? And there's absolute examples of excellent work that goes on there of, keeping youngsters within a mainstream school and all the rest of it. But again, not reflected in the inspection. However, there's lots of work goes on. What we're looking at, and Evelyn's team has this, they've got a rapid response team to work with the elderly. And I'm looking at that from a children and families perspective. Can we have a rapid response team where a school is experiencing a difficulty, that we could have people that would go in and give a level of support? It could be family support workers, it could be behaviour support staff, to give support, stabilise and then move back. So there would always be a need for it. But can we use that resource more proactively? Do you know what I mean? So we're in the early stages of doing that, but I think that's something that we need. But we need to be having the dialogue from Evelyn's team to find out, what would be the pitfalls. But that's definitely what I feel would be a response. So we're looking at that. We're also reviewing the efficacy of the top service, reviewing top and pave for our youngsters, at stage 3, who really have kind of lost enthusiasm for school. So there's a whole lot of reviews that are going on that will come together and, have a more proactive approach to these things.
Thank you for that. Do we have any sense of a timeline where we might expect to see at least the early findings of these reviews?
Some of them have already reported. So the review of our fostering and adoption has been reported on, and that's why we've got the team reconfigured. Top and pave, our ASN resourcing, we anticipate, forget hope, we anticipate that we will have the outcome of these reviews by the end of March. That allows us a bit of time to work with schools before next August. So schools will be part of these reviews. It's not, they're excluded, but in terms of moving it forward, I would anticipate March that we'll have the information so that by August, anything that's identified can be implemented in the new school session.
Okay, with that we wrote the report. Thank you, Mary. It takes us on to communities and support.
Communities and support. Again, lots of work going on here in terms of what we're doing with our local communities. The library service is working in partnership with MELDAP to support the pop-up recovery conversation cafes in the libraries. And these encourage people to work in their local areas, to attend in their local areas. They don't have to go to East Lothian, or, they don't have to come from Pennycook to Mayfield. They can do work in their own localities. The Early Years Collaborative, Lisa's already reported on that, this is moving forward at a pace. The GIRFEC partnership gave evidence to the Finance Committee, and we did really well in there. That was very positive. So City of Edinburgh and ourselves were the only two local authorities that gave evidence based on calculations, what we think in terms of the partnership. We have a high number of children and adults who attend the book bug sessions. And again, early intervention, early reading, very positive for our children. The library service continues to offer practical help to those who wish to improve their IT skills. And Dalkeith Library closed for refurbishment and Bonnyrigg Library moved to Lasswade. But despite that, nearly 1,000 children participated in the Summer Reading Challenge, with over 50% completing the challenge. The resource planning team has made considerable effort in improving Midlothian's pupil enrolment process and carried the responsibility of defending the Council's pupil placement decision at appeal. This is really important. I've discussed it here before. Do you know, we have parents from out with Midlothian who want to come in and access Saltersgate or specialist provision that we provide, and it becomes very difficult and very messy, but Sandra Banks and the staff did very well in terms of that hearing. Grant funding of over 20,000 has been awarded to produce an online database of Midlothian people killed or injured during World War I, and joint work with high schools in the area, and a contribution of CLD to delivering the curriculum the Curriculum for Excellence and the school improvement planning and the development of a new partnership at Lasswade High School. So again, we've got the new Lasswade Centre, but it's how people work together. We don't just assume that we put people in there and everything will work out. It's about how we work together. Successful implementation of the pilot knife crime initiative, which delivered in high schools and specialist services, and lights camera action. Both of these were welcomed by the inspection team. The youngsters actually gave a presentation prior to this to the inspectors about the work that goes on. There's been a significant increase in the number of adult learning classes, up by 125%, and the number of students participating by 200%. Dalkeith Community Campus, it's the 10th year anniversary. Where has the time gone? And there was considerable investment of 300,000 by BAM to upgrade the facility. 1.1 million was invested in a number of schools, and the works included roof replacement at Lasswade Primary, Hawthorne Den Primary School and St Mary's Primary School, toilet refurbishments and playground resurfacing work. And there's a number of other schools that were upgraded as well. I think this is really fascinating that this is on the second page and gets 2 lines. Lasswade High School was completed in Q1. That should be the biggest thing. It should be on the front page, and it should have bells and whistles and everything. But I mean, what a magnificent achievement across the authority, not just within communities and support services. We should all be, presenting that as a great example of working together. And the General Schools Maintenance, working collectively with colleagues to agree and compile a property maintenance and facility management induction pack for head teachers. So if you recall, we've got 1/3 of our head teachers are new. So pulling together a report like that, what do you need to do? Who do you need to call? So that was produced. I'll pause there for any questions.
Thank you, Convener. I can only echo Mary's last comments about Lasswade Centre and Lasswade High School in particular, and the fact that if we see this from the One Council view, which I am deeply committed to, and I think most people in the room are similarly, because it is the way forward, we have to say that the achievement that we saw when those of us who, and I think it was everyone in the room, attended the opening event, that the First Minister graciously was our honoured guest to open it, I think it was a mark of that huge achievement that the First Minister did come and open it, given all the other particular commitments he has at this time. And I think we all know what they are. But at a time of increasing challenge, that he took so much time to spend not just on unveiling a brass plaque, but actually talking to and listening to our pupils and staff at Lasswade. And from that very positive note, I am very concerned to note that in spite of substantial commitment to ensuring that some of the maintenance and refurbishment work on some of our older school estate has been finally, albeit delayed, moving forward, I found it very difficult to learn that the Parent Council of Lasswade Primary School had been so very condemning and judgmental, and very negatively so, in spite of having such a very significant investment in their school. I wondered whether or not the Director had any views about how we might more effectively communicate with the one council approach with parent councils, in order that there was perhaps no miscommunication or lack of understanding of what actually was going on. Because when we have such bitter letters of complaint that are clearly based on a false premise and lack of understanding, clearly we do have an issue of communication. And I wondered if the Director had any particular views as to how we might best address that, to ensure that we have better relationships with some parent councils. Although in general this is not an issue, I realise that in some cases it's a source of considerable frustration for the people involved, not least those who have been going to some extraordinary lengths to address the issues. And I would point my finger very clearly here at Gary Sherratt, who I happen to know went to extraordinary lengths to ensure that the work at Lasswade Primary School was undertaken properly and on time during the summer holidays. I know because as I was patrolling the building on a weekly basis to make sure the work was going on as promised, I know that he was doing the same, even though he was actually on holiday on one of the weeks that he was doing that tour of inspection. Over and above that, can I also comment that I am particularly encouraged by the work going on in our schools for the Anti-Bullying Week, and to note that the Lasswade Forum, the Youth Forum themselves, have been so energetic on their anti-bullying campaign, and with the support of CLD, have been taking their own experiences of bullying into a very positive direction to support other young people. Bullying is something that can affect us all at any time of our lives, and is the most venomous and offensive form of violence, and it is a form of social violence, and to underestimate it would be foolish. So to find our youngsters leading the way on this pernicious disease is really, for my part, very encouraging. And I think we should salute Claire Taylor-Brown and Jake Herriot and the rest of the team at Lasswade, who are supporting the youngsters in their very bold initiative. I believe we will be seeing something of their work in the national press. There are some items of concern, but I will pick those up at a more available time with the Director.
Thanks, Lisa. I think if Kenneth spoke about complaints earlier on, and I think if I look at the complaints from my services, I think the biggest complaint would be lack of communication. That we haven't taken the time to either acknowledge a complaint or to explain the reasons why something's happened. So if you're a parent expecting your school roof to be repaired and it's not for some reason, it could be a delay by the builder, it could be a delay because we can't do the piece of work during the school, we have to let people know that and hope that people understand that these things happen. I think what then happens is that people then think, and quite rightly they can do that because it's a democratic society we live in, we'll go to our elected members and we will complain bitterly about, you know, this has been delayed and whatnot. But again, I think if we treat our, you know, our customers with respect and, you know, with confidence, I think then, you know, we get people on board and we say, these are the reasons and that's why. But certainly within my services, I can tell you the biggest complaint is just lack of communication. So people don't know what's happening. And I think that would be one of the ways to improve things.
Members satisfied? Thank you, Mary. We'll note that report, and that then takes us on to education.
Again, education is a positive report. Again, they've started off with the Early Years Collaborative because there's a lot of really good work going on. And then we're looking about the implementation of strategies for raising attainment. We have above average reading scores at P4 and P7 and results are above average for maths at P4 and an improving picture at P7. The Midlothian results in the national qualifications at S4, 5 and 6 displayed areas of improvement. However, we know we have a way to go with that. So there's development work going on, and representatives from all Midlothian subject departments have attended SQA seminars and curriculum update events, and verifiers have been appointed. Developments and study support, including materials for National 4 and National 5 and higher, are being produced for pupils and being made available online and as an app for phones. Improved pathways for learners. There's work going on with Edinburgh College on the back of their definitive commitment to working with Midlothian to maximise positive destinations for young people, and the Academy's work has continued to develop between the two organisations. And we're working with Edinburgh College to explore plans to introduce similar academy approaches for engineering, and this will include the involvement of brand name engineering employers. There are also plans to develop an NHS academy in the near future. There's been considerable work done from our secondary schools in terms of positive destinations and much sustained positive destinations. I think we need to be using that word. Much of it's been centred on engagement of both secondary school head teachers and senior leaders in the school, and thereafter on guidance teachers who can and do play a crucial role. The short-term focus at this time of year has been around targeting those school leavers who, without support, will drift into negative destinations. Our schools have been working closely with Skills Development Scotland during the census month of September to compile accurate data relating to the destinations of school leavers. And again, a two-line. Lastweed High School Centre opened. So again, we've said that, you know, that is a one council approach to the work that went on there. The challenges are implement strategies for raising attainment and achievement of children and adults, and Peter is, you know, really focused on this. He's visited all 6 secondary schools. They've reviewed the SQA performance and identified future actions, and they already have highlighted priorities. There is a need to redesign the whole approach for raising attainment and to broaden this out to a one council approach. It's everybody's responsibility to raise attainment. The Head of Education convened an attainment review group and to start the review work. Introductory work has now been undertaken with Education Scotland to explore how we can develop and shape the concept of a partnership agreement to ensure that this leads to the strengthening of approaches. And the most recent results from our PIP scores for Midlothian primary schools continues to present a challenge. Standardised scores for P1 pupils on entry to school are off target in reading and maths. At P7, while our scores are above the national average in literacy, recent figures have shown a down on our annual target. While P7 numeracy results show an improving trend, the figures are down on our annual target. So, though we're improving, it's not what we would wish. In terms of exclusion from school, we've had a higher than usual number of exclusion incidents in primary schools in Q2, and we're taking measures to address this challenge. Pause there.
Thank you, Convener. Can I echo the Director's earlier words when she made reference to putting children on the Child Protection Register? It's about safety. It's about appropriateness. The same should apply surely to exclusion, that while we would prefer that no child was ever excluded from school, sometimes it is in the best interest of both that child and the school community in general. And I would hate to think that the kind of attention that exclusions bring would discourage any head teacher from taking that action where it was necessary. And I would hope they would recognise they would have the support of all of the Cabinet in taking appropriate steps to exclude, if that is the only option to achieve that level of safety. And I realise that sometimes we talk about exclusion in the same way we talk about the Child Protection Register, as if by having it and using it, we're doing something very negative. And I would suggest the opposite is true. I was particularly impressed at my recent visit to Lawfield Primary, which has had a significant number of exclusions over the years. But the remarkable progress that's being made there to achieve a very loving family environment for our children, where all the staff seem completely committed and engaged in achieving that. And I'd be grateful if the Director would pass on my appreciation of that work to everyone at Lawfield Primary. In particular, if I take the Ian Jackson approach to the indicators where we are off target, as he was fond of saying when he was here. Let's just cut to the chase and focus on the negatives. I think the reason I comment on that is to draw attention to the fact that the only negatives of the indicators where they're off target are a lot of them to do with the establishment of the new N4 and 5. And so much work and attention is going towards that. And I think it's important that we recognise the superhuman task that's being put, particularly to our principal teachers across the authority in our high schools, to try and develop the work towards N4 and 5. I'm particularly concerned to note that there has been some substantial amount of confusion around exactly what it is SQA are proposing. And while I'm deeply grateful that Peter McNaughton is leading all appropriate intervention work to ensure that we have got clear focus and understanding on exactly what the current SQA position is on the establishment of N4 and 5, noting particularly that the two things are not one higher level of the same thing, that they are two different curricula. And I think it's really important that that's recognised and understood, and that we give appropriate support to any intervention to make sure that we timeously have that work achieved. And my understanding, and I'd be grateful for the Director's view on this, that we must have that work achieved before the middle of next term to be successful and not risk any potential damage to our children's future. I know this picture is a national one, not a local issue, but I'm grateful for the local intervention and the very speedy and keen concern of all the head teachers in achieving this. And ask the Director, is there anything that we, as the Cabinet, need to be doing to support that initiative?
I know it was reported nationally that some local authorities don't feel they will be ready for the implementation of N4 and N5s. And one local authority indeed has said they will not implement it. I've discussed this very briefly with Peter, and from a Midlothian perspective, and we're working in partnership with East Lothian, from his view, there weren't any barriers to progress, is what I'll say at the moment. But perhaps we could take this offline and we could speak about it in our meetings, just to make sure that we are on the right track and doing the things that will help to implement this.
I think members happy to note the report. Thanks, Mary. Takes us on to planning and development, quarter 2.
Thanks, Convener. Just very briefly, in terms of progress on the main items, the Strategic Development Plan for Edinburgh South East Scotland, of which Midlothian is one of the 6 partner councils, is progressing to the point where ministers have given, or the minister's given his approval of the plan, which effectively became the plan, and therefore the structure plan, the old structure plan, was superseded in June, but subject to, as you probably know, the 6 councils coming forward with proposals to meet the housing target. The Minister felt they were some way short of that. That guidance has been prepared and was approved for publication back in the end of September. All of the 6 councils ratified it. It's gone out to public consultation for 6 weeks up until Christmas. And as you know, the helpful thing in terms of Midlothian is that the additional housing requirement being consulted upon is only 100 units. One of the big advantages of that, it means that the strategy of Midlothian Local Development Plan is not knocked off course. And there's a report coming up to Cabinet today which is setting out the responses, summary of responses which have come in on the Midlothian Local Development Plan, which had its extensive consultation period over the summer, and we received something just over 2,100 responses. We were able now to, through further member involvement as we go into the new year, we're looking at, therefore, the publishing the proposed plan, which is the next stage of the development plan process in the spring. What we will be seeking to do is to perhaps change the format something to make it more focused in relation to the Council's top 3 priorities. So I think the traditional format is fine, but I think it probably needs to be given a more corporate and more directional approach in relation to the 3 top priorities. Similarly, with the Midlothian Economic Recovery Plan, which is in progress, that's been subject to a very extensive consultation over the last 6 to 7 months, and I think that's been a real advantage in getting some consensus of what the key issues are. Again, we'll be looking to have a document which is more action-orientated, particularly skewed towards the 3 top priorities of the Council, inevitably economic development being the prime one in relation to that document. And that's still to come through now, the sort of formal governance processes which we're looking to do over the next 2 to 3 months. Just an update on Shawfair, and I met with Buccleuch yesterday, and they're agreeing that we're just about there with getting an agreement together. We could probably now really set the legals in process. as you know, the land deal to transfer the land jointly owned by the two councils, that's middle of the City of Edinburgh. That deal has been done. The date of entry is early next year, at which point the financial deal will be completed and the transfer of money to the two councils will occur. Very briefly on a couple of other things. Planning application performance is continuing to steadily improve, and probably I would highlight the performance on householder applications, which has been very good this year. And that is quite heartening, because it's those people who deal probably only once or twice in their lives with the planning process. They make their planning application. If that's a bad experience, it just puts them off completely. And I think there's a big advantage there. Just to mention, the launch of the Gorebridge Conservation Area Regeneration Scheme took place in October. Very pleased that Rod Lugg, who was so successful in spearheading things at Dalkeith, is also going to be involved at Gorebridge, and I think we could take a lot of heart from that. And finally, just to mention that the Community Asset Transfer Seminar is due for next Tuesday, and I think that that's be able to take that long-term policy forward and obviously have member involvement in how they wish to see that recast and taken forward. Otherwise, happy to take questions.
Thanks, Ian. It's encouraging to see so much happening, especially given the workload that Bring It On, the strategic development plan and the local plan at the same time brings, and the pressure that puts on the team. So I think that's something we all welcome, especially given that we only have got an extra 100 units through the additional guidance. I'm content if any other members' questions. Thank you. Takes us on to commercial operations. John.
Thanks, Chair. In terms of the 4 services listed, as I've said at previous performance committees, a lot of work is work in progress and ongoing and straddles not only individual quarters but over financial years. So with the committee's indulgence, I'll just take 4 services in a one-hour and focus on the successes and also bring commentary on some emerging trends. Just before I focus on the successes, just to reassure committee across the division, we've strengthened financial controls. When I've sat here at this time in previous years, there's been deficits in the budget position. It's closer to zero, so we've got robust financial controls. We're also planning for the next coming months and for next year, and also as a division we're contributing to work across the whole of the council with colleagues Mary, Eblin and the Chief Exec and respective heads of service. And we're also concerned, similar to Mary, regarding sickness levels. In terms of the positives, I'll just pick one from each of the 4 services. Recycling performance increased. Straddling across customer and property, EWIM actually was delivered in this financial year after a wait of 16 years, and I'm personally really pleased with the work that the team have done in that. Within finance and HR, purchase to pay is beginning to progress and give us an Amazon-type way of ordering goods and services. That will revolutionise the way we operate and move away from dated 1982 systems that I personally put in place. And last week, I'm delighted all my colleagues are mentioning it, but let's put some credit to the builders and the project managers, please. In terms of the challenges, waste services continues to be a challenge, both in terms of recycling. We're working with unions and colleagues regarding the current work to contract. It's softening. Each week I've got advice committee. Within customer services, welfare reform and collection levels remains a concern, not only in Midlothian but across Scotland, and with a number of the issues going on there, that will be a long-term issue for us. Within finance and HR, we're really looking at the way we provide human resource services. And finally, the new Battle High School, given the levels and the standards we've set for last Wade, I think as a council we would be doing a disservice to the people of Nitton, Gorebridge, Mayfield, East Houses and the surrounding areas if New Battle High is not of the same ilk. With that indulgence, I'll pause, Chair, with the final word. I know that's been a quick run through. I'm conscious we've got a cabinet at 11 o'clock, but if colleagues want further information, I'm quite happy to share it offline and meet with colleagues and relevant heads of service.
Thanks, John. Certainly, I mean, I know the the waste issue is one that we've discussed and one that we will be taking up again off the agenda here. Encouraging to see the recycling levels getting so high. Is any of that down to the opposition recycling headlines?
John, if we could find some way of publicising the fact that we make money out of waste recycling, we could get more people on board.
It's a difficult one, Councillor, because part of the issue in recycling is the international markets where the products go vary significantly. And particularly what's happening in Asia, in the China region, can have an impact. So it's difficult. It's cheaper in terms of selling recycling as opposed to putting it in landfill, but there's a collection cost, so it's a difficult argument, and I'm a bit nervous because of the volatility of these markets. They're up and down like that, and currently they're on a downward trend. But what I'll do is a briefing on the possibilities with these concerns, if that's okay.
On page 7, this is on behalf of Lisa. On page 7, RL3 percentage of all streetlight repairs completed within 7 days. But in the note column, you have it's an off-target situation with 666 out of 760 faults recorded were repaired in 7 days. Can you explain this, please?
Quite simply, we've had one promotion where one of the electricians became a supervisor and another one of the electricians left the service under quick circumstances. So it's a resourcing issue. We're aware of it. We've had it before through sickness absence and we've addressed it. But unfortunately, because of these two staff changes, there has been an impact on the performance. I do anticipate it will improve as we go through the year.
With that, if we note that report, thank you for your attendance.